Good evening, and welcome to A Night at the Museum with Richard Hulser. My name is Sarah Emerson, and I'm currently chair of the SJSU ASIS student chapter. Tonight's program is a presentation collaboratively organized by the SJSU ASIS student chapter and the Los Angeles chapter of ASIS. I'm so pleased that the LA chapter of ASIS has joined SJSU ASIS in co-sponsoring this event, and I hope that this will lead to more cooperative ventures between our two organizations in the future. Tonight's presentation will last approximately 1 hour, including time provided for a Q&A session after the presentation. At this time, I will now turn the mic over to Sarah Buchanan, the chair of the LA chapter of ASIS, who will introduce her organization. Following Sarah Buchanan will be Carletta Woods, Vice Chair of the SJSU ASIS Student Chapter, who has the distinct honor of introducing tonight's guest speaker. And without further ado, I give you Sarah Buchanan.
Greetings to everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I was very much looking forward to being here tonight with you. And like Sarah and Carletta, I too was also an officer in our ASIS chapter. I graduated in 2009 from the UCLA program, and subsequently I've been serving as an officer of Los Angeles chapter. Since then, I've really enjoyed it, and I would highly encourage all of you students attending tonight to please contact me at my email, sarahab@ucla.edu, if you're interested in joining LACASIS as an officer or as a member. The Los Angeles chapter has been active since 1961. We hold local programs all across California and also collaborate with ASIS National. And their conference this year is in Baltimore. So if anybody's thinking about going there, I'll be there this October. We have members in California, Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia, and of course Nevada. I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada currently. We have open officer positions. If you're interested in chair-elect or program officer or membership, newsletter of OASIS, editor, please let me know. Again, I love to be in touch with you, and I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Carletta. Also wanted to mention our website, which is lacasis.org, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate that, and we're glad that you could join us this evening. I'm very pleased to welcome our speaker this evening, the Chief Librarian of the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, Mr. Richard Hulser. Mr. Hulser has over 30 years of international experience working in and with a variety of library and cultural institutions to help them enhance their use of technology for information management. His previous positions have been in corporate and academic libraries as well as in information service companies. He's a Software and Information Industrial Association Certified Content Right Manager, a Fellow of the Special Libraries Association, and currently the Chair of the FLA Museum Arts and Humanities Division. He's held a variety of other elected and appointed positions in the FLA and is a member of ASIS and the American Library Association. Mr. Hulser holds an ALA-accredited MA in Librarianship and Information Management from the University of Denver. He has a Master's in Education and Instructional Media and Instructional Product Development from the Utah State University. And he also has a BS in Earth and Space Sciences from Stony Brook University. I encourage you to visit his blog, as I found it very interesting and informative, and I will give you the link right now. So please join me in a warm, very warm welcome and a virtual round of applause to our guest speaker for the evening, Mr. Richard Hulser.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I see that the symbol is showing my voice is coming across, so if you can't hear me or if there's any problems throughout the talk, or if you have any questions, feel free to put it in chat, and Coletta or Sarah will let me know and handle that. But I'd like to hold most questions till the end. And but if there's something burning in your mind that you want to get answered, I'll see what I can do about that. So thanks for joining us for today. I hope you find it interesting. And we'll get started. So I titled this the NHM Research Library Warp Speed to the Cloud and Using Technology as a Catalyst for Change and Collaboration. So what I plan to do is give you an overview of what a cultural institution or special library like this is, and also some of the challenges and some of the ways I am meeting that challenge. And I hope you find it interesting. So the key components of this talk this evening will be the museum itself and what the museum is doing and how that's important to what I'm doing. Talk about the research library history and its challenges, and talk about something that everyone says the integrated library system or library systems are dead, and why I don't think so completely, or at least certainly not as they morph into something new, and talk about the latest hot technology, which is the cloud, and where we're going from here. So let's talk about the museum itself. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, but we're actually a family of museums, 3 of them. One is where I'm located, which is the Natural History Museum, located in the Exposition Park area, just south of the University of University of Southern California, naturally. But we're also, in our family, we have the Page Museum. You know it most likely as the La Brea Tar Pits, very famous. And also we have the William S. Hart Museum that is located about an hour's drive from here to the north. And that is a museum that is a Western film star from the 1920s and 30s who willed his estate to the county, LA County, and is now a permanent part of the group. And if any of you saw the recent silent movie that won the Academy Award, some of the pieces that were used in that movie are being displayed at the museum, I think, until June. So the family of museums are located in a couple of places. So already that's a challenge because it's more than one physical location where people need and do research and visit. And the mission overall is, as you see on the screen, is to inspire wonder, discovery, and responsibility for our natural and cultural worlds. And up until a couple of years ago, this was a pretty static place, just like a lot of museums are perceived to be. But the museum decided to, the board of directors and whatnot, decided to really get together and figure out a way to get it to its current state and get people interested in, again, in the very many valuable things that the museum has to offer. And the way they've decided to do that is shown in this graphic, which is something that they call NHM Next, which is the Natural History Museum Next. Reimagining the museum and everything that you perceive about what a museum is and what it could be. And you'll see it's got quite a pretty plan and landscape, and we're in the progress of getting all of this wonderful stuff done. I'm going to take you briefly through it just so you understand the variety and complexity and how a research library has potential to really be an integral part of all of this. So, for instance, here is what the main entrance of the museum has looked like for many, many, many years. Not too pretty, pretty cold, pretty 1960s looking, and not very inviting. And what you see is going to be is this. quite a difference. And I should point out that the central figure or focal point are actually a couple of things. One is in the foreground, the gardens that will be quite nice and are in the process of being finished. This bridge, this unique bridge into the museum as one way to enter the museum, and extremely important is the fin whale, one of the largest articulated fin whales in the world, that will be displayed in this big glass box that you'll be able to walk into the entrance of the museum and be underneath. And so that's quite a dramatic change from what you saw in the previous slide. In addition, over a multi-year plan, in July of 2010, the Age of Mammals exhibit was opened, and to much accolade and many awards by the museum community. The following year, in June, this past year, the Dinosaur Hall was opened, the new one, and what you see in the picture is what's called the T-Rex Growth Series, which is the only actual skulls and skeletons of Tyrannosaurus rex, baby, young adult, and juvenile, that was found just recently in 2003 in Montana. So something you'll not see anywhere else in the world, and we're pretty proud of that and the dramatic way it's being shown. I should tell you there's also a fossil skeleton of a pregnant dinosaur that, again, is something unique that I didn't even know about in all my years of study. So if you're interested in that, that's something fun to see. In the end of this year, it's planned to open the History Hall, what's being known right now as Becoming Los Angeles, which will be an exciting 2 large halls of the history of Los Angeles, culturally, geologic, economically, just you name it, it's going to be treated, and that's quite exciting. And between now and next year, the North Campus Gardens, which will be an outdoor learning garden, as well as an indoor nature lab, will be opened, scheduled for a grand opening in June of 2013. And next year is also the 100th anniversary of this museum, and its official 100th anniversary will be in October. But you can see with all of these elements that there's lots of change going on. And that's actually a great thing. A great thing because oftentimes when you want to introduce your researchers or your patrons to something new or different, they don't necessarily like change. But with all this other change going on, it makes it that much more expected. So that's really important to me, and you'll understand why when I take you through some of the history of the library and why we are where we are today. And so, bringing you back to the graphic, the past, present, and the research library next, as I'm calling it, because our marketing people call the big multi-year project NHM Next. So why not tag onto that with something familiar to my constituency, which is mainly the museum staff and outside researchers on appointment basis only. Not a public library. We act much like an academic library in many ways, but we are a specialized research library. And one of the cute things that a lot of people here have been asking me since I joined in May of 2010 was what's about the library? When's the library going to reopen? And I'll take you through the why that's a big challenge in a minute. But so I recently presented that to them on what's the 411 on the research library to an entire all-staff meeting, and they got it. Those of you who are old enough to remember when you dialed the telephone for information, you dialed 411. So that's where that comes from. A little take on that, and a little kitschy maybe, but it worked very well. So the history of the library. The library started in the early 1920s, as you see, as a depository branch of the Los Angeles Public Library, or also known as the Los Angeles Free Library. And in the middle of the 1920s, it was fully part of the museum and no longer a branch. And the librarian, who was considered a branch librarian, became the museum librarian. And we're not really sure of the people who are pictured here, but my guess is that the woman in the middle at the card catalog is likely the librarian, but I can't be sure. I'm still researching that. But you will notice that there is some folding chairs in the foreground in the middle, and those chairs, some of them still exist today, and are probably one of the most comfortable chairs of their type, even compared to those that are made today. So there's something to be said for the good design and engineering from the old days. And so that's kind of fun to have those around and use them. And I should mention that the first library collections, came from a combination of organizations back in 1913 and soon thereafter. One from the Historical Society of Southern California, and also the Cooper Ornithological Club. And as the museum was formed, the more materials came from the Southern California Academy of Sciences, and today we are still the repository for their publications, and also for many of the museum staff. And to this day, a lot of materials do come from museum staff, but also from many volunteers of the past years and employees as they've moved on to other things. The library at the time also had a picture library. And again, I don't know who these ladies are in the middle, but I'm guessing at least one of them is one of the librarians at the time. And I just think this is a fantastic picture because it just the clothing, the hairstyles, and just the nature of the room. To think that I'm in the same room that these folks were in not quite 100 years ago, and all those wonderful items that are there are now most likely part of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art's collection, because in the 1960s, the LACMA was formed, or birthed, I like to say, out of this museum, which was originally the Museum of History, Science, and Art when it was first formed. So a lot of people don't realize that. So a lot of the books and other materials, in addition to specimens and some staff in the 1960s, left this building and moved over to what became LACMA as we know it today. So a little fun little piece of data there. And here's a picture of the library, probably in the 1970s. And unfortunately, with the way this Blackboard tool works, all the fancy ways of having my little graphic in the middle come up separately, it doesn't do that. But you see that in the middle there is a combination of specimens and books. And what they did in the 1970s was they really tried to tie the collection itself to the specimen collection that was in the museum to really show the tie-in of the research library with the other research work and exhibit development and presentations that were done in the museum. And in the far right background, you'll see a card catalog, and you're going to see that again in just a few minutes. This is another picture of the library, a color picture. I thought, well, it's similar to what you just saw, but it's in color, so I thought you'd get a kick out of seeing that. The cork floors that are there are still in the library today, a bit more worn. There's about at least one or two of you who are volunteers with me or who have been volunteers, so they know firsthand what this place is all about. And you can see quite crowded. In fact, at the time, even in the 1970s and early 80s, they had so much materials that they didn't have enough room on the shelves for them. They had them in boxes on top of the stacks. And unfortunately, even today, we have some of that difficulty. But reading is a very important word to not only say, but do. So keep that in mind as you work in your particular institution. So I mentioned earlier about how I was building on the concept of NHM Next with the Research Library Next concept. And on the left-hand side, you see the old card catalog and a newer, fuller card catalog. And up until this month, this library has never had an automated system in place, a library system. So that's a really big deal. In most other places, in fact, at computers and libraries in Washington, D.C. recently, I asked the entire audience of a good 100 people how many of them still had a card catalog, and not one of them raised their hand. They all had electronic catalogs. But if you poll people in museums and other cultural institutions, you'll find they have a combination of electronic and print. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But here my objective is to transform the concept of just using print and thinking of the library as a warehouse into one that has electronic and print. And that's what's represented by the intranet screen, which has long since been updated with a few more things in the past few months, in addition to web presence on the outside, soon to be made live, and of course the book collection. Yes, exactly, a balancing act of digital and print. You get it. So when I first joined this place in May of 2010, I had no access to the physical library. It was under construction, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a minute. So my objective was, while I was in the temporary location in an office on the 3rd floor, the library's on the ground floor, on the 3rd floor, I was there for a number of months, as you can see, June 2010 through February of this year, 2012. So quite a long time. I wanted to turn the perception of the library as being a passive materials warehouse into one of an active source of information and education. And so I used that time to do the combination of being an embedded librarian and what in management speak is management by walking around. I was doing librarianship by walking around, meeting the curators and the research staff in their offices, understanding what they did, how they did research, what tools they used. Some of them are affiliated with universities, so they already have access to online tools. And understanding that, and how do I position the library relative to the fact that they're used to access to resources that we probably will never have access to, or well, never say never, but certainly not in the near term due to lack of affordability. But so therefore I'm looking at focusing on services while dealing with the collection and collection management and understanding what to do with it. And I think that's an important concept whether you're in a corporate library, an academic library, a special library of any sort, or working with information digitally or in print. Services are a critical piece. So this is a portion of the room upstairs, and so this became the library with some of the old chairs, as you saw in that 1930s picture. I think you'll find, and in later pictures in the 1970s, those chairs are still around and still used. And the interesting thing was that people didn't come in that often because it was more looking like it was a library, but it was also an office. So that was an interesting sociologic thing from my point of view. So the library itself, and around the fall of 2008, there was a need and the funding obtained to retrofit the south wall of the museum for earthquake, making sure that it was able to withstand earthquakes. And anyone who has lived here more than just a few months knows we do get them. And so that was important. At the same time, it was around that time that actually a few months before, back in January, that the librarian had retired and then soon passed away, who was here. And so there was, at the time, only a solo librarian and a part-time volunteer person. And so the library was closed. And when I was hired in May of 2010, what I first saw, even during the interview process, what is what you see before you, which was a card catalog, A. B, a bunch of journals that had been checked in by one of the volunteers from another department to at least keep them going, and just stacked on the shelf above the card catalog. What I also saw was this. And so there's the library under plastic, because it had to be, the collection had to be protected. What it doesn't show you is that on the south side, 1/3 of the collection was boxed up, the shelves moved and put, the boxes and shelves both, put in between all the other shelves full of books. And so that's the way it was from approximately October 2008 until February, well actually, I take that back, until June of last year, when I was able to get some small amount of funding to get the collection cleaned and unboxed and put back on the shelf. And so quite a challenge, and with no real budget to do it and no staff, because I am a solo librarian, except for my wonderful volunteers, and I'll talk about them in just a few minutes. So partway through, you'll see there's a bunch of columns, and where those columns are was a temporary wall to protect the collection, and the windows to the right, which are brand new windows, were totally new and rebuilt, and for a while that wall was in pieces, and so it was open to the elements for a number of months while the construction was going on. So it didn't look as clean and pristine as it does in this picture, but you get the idea. And this is, to give you an idea of how big this room is, it's 7,000 square feet. And it's got ceiling heights of about, I believe, 20 feet, 16 to 20 feet high. So quite a big room. And today, this is what the library looks like. So quite a transformation, and again, you see the wonderful chairs, my wonderful chairs, and the tables. And you'll see a couple of stacks of boxes, which are representative of a lot of work that is yet to be done, but we've made a lot of progress in it. So that gives you an idea of the physical elements to the library. Now let's get into a little bit about the collections and some of the challenges. And you as librarians and information managers are going to have these no matter how current a organization is where you are going to be employed. So just take this as one maybe case study, if you will. So we have about 200,000 books, maybe as many as 230,000 books and journals housed not only in 7,000 square feet of this room, but also in department, sectional, or divisional collections. And there are hundreds of books in each of those. And we also have a scholarly publications exchange program where we publish scholarly peer-reviewed journals that are sent out to our sister institutions and other similar research institutions around the world, and they send us materials back, so in exchange, so neither of us pay for each other's materials. Slowly that's becoming digital, but in the meantime lots of stuff running around in the international mails, and we have about 500 titles that way, and that's books and periodicals both. We have, so of the 200,000 plus volumes we have, those are represented by about 90,000 titles, half of which are cataloged in OCLC, which they've only had here since the 1980s. And there's another 8,000 to 9,000 titles that were cataloged, but not officially added to OCLC, because for the long time you had to pay $1.50 to up to $3 a title to add, and that, when you multiply that times 8,000 or 9,000, you're talking a lot of real money, and the budget didn't allow for that. So there's some retrospective cataloging. The books have the catalog numbers on them, but the catalog records need to be added to OCLC, so there's a challenge. We also have 25% of our collection still in Dewey, while the rest is in LC, so there's that. So yes, there's still the retrospective conversion of the collection in that regard. The Okay, let's see here. Okay, so the sectional libraries are represented by many of the different departments of research that are done here at the museum. And the ones in bright, large yellow letters are the ones that have their own special collections or divisional collections. And you can see there's many. And I would point out entomology in particular right now. You'll remember that fin whale being installed or planned to be installed next year in the front of our building on the north side. Well, the entomology labs and offices are adjacent to the wall where that fin whale is to be installed, and so those have to be reconstructed, and they've had to leave those offices temporarily, and there's 400 linear feet of books in their collection that I'm trying to integrate into this collection that is already pretty full in this room. So there's a couple of challenges there, and that's a good thing and a challenge, but it's fun. So you can see a lot of different departments, a lot of different areas of study that we do here. Not only is it science, but it's Western history. You'll see the Page Museum, La Brea Tar Pits represented here, and one area where we do have a small collection, which is not on my list, I just realized, is the Hart Museum collection. They have a very small collection as well. So you can see quite a variety. And so, okay, so why would I consider library system, and why would I consider looking at the cloud as an example? So let's get into some technology planning. And here's the key. I have a fully manual library operation currently. As I mentioned, the library's been closed for over 3 years. The researchers themselves didn't even have a librarian for at least 2 years. And so they had to rely mainly on their own to obtain content through Interlibrary Loan or whatever through the universities that the curators in particular belong to. The department managed their own collections, and a lot of the books in their collections are cataloged by the library. So every once in a while they talk to me and they say, are you ready yet to catalog all our books that are waiting for you? And we're not just talking 10 or 20 books. We're talking a couple of hundred books in some cases. So lots of work to do. As a solo librarian, that makes you parse out your day carefully as best you can. I have a lot of good volunteers from various programs, including San Jose's program. And I have a very small, tight budget for lots of reasons over the years, and which is typical of the museum and other cultural institutions. Very limited IT support. They are really doing core machine installation, telephone installation, internet management, that kind of thing. I would mention that our marketing department has our digital web educated and management people. So the website you see as a general public person going to the nhm.org website is managed through the marketing department, and the IT internal support is managed by a completely different department. And this is actually not that unusual, and in fact even in large organizations sometimes you have separate departments. Is it ideal to have one single cohesive one? Yes, and I think we're trending toward that and everyone doing their part, but we've got a ways to go with that. So there's that. So in looking at how am I going to transfer a completely manual operation to one with digital capabilities, I had to look at a lot of things. And I did look at what about having a local system installed. I've managed those. I've done that in different jobs in the past. When I worked for IBM for many years, I used to help a lot of institutions install their systems, including the 20 campus sites of the City University of New York when they had their individual systems back in the 1980s and converged into one single managed system at the time. And so I know how to do that. I can do that, but I have a lot of other responsibilities. So I looked at, well, what's another alternative? Well, fortunately, the cloud is another way to do it, as we're calling it today. So I'm looking at functionality, affordability, a key one. You can often get access to licensed applications at a fraction of the cost of fully installing and managing a system locally. Not always the case for being appropriate for an institution, but it's certainly something to look at, especially if you have not a big staff, especially if you only have minimal IT support available. And so therefore your requirements are a bit different than where you can just call up the IT department that has very capable and extensive staff. So I also wanted something that could be flexible and easy access from the desktop so that people didn't necessarily physically have to be in the library to know what we had. These days all of you are thinking, well, of course, but not something that is typical in places like this. So, and this meant on-site or off-site, and so whether they're working at another location or from home, or we have a lot of people who are in the field, and they go globally. They're in China, they're in Russia, and whatever. So more and more people are capably accessing the internet, and so that's one thing. And also, I don't have on here mobile support capability with whatever device, and a tablet, a smartphone, whatever it is. And also something that museum staff and general users alike ultimately can access. Although again, I point out that we're not a public library, we're a research specialized library here. Okay, so hopefully I've still got you all here. I see you're still here, so that's good. So far so good. So let me tell you a little bit about the not so great things about going to a cloud environment. That you're going to find challenges no matter what you do with technology. You all know that. But first of all, internet access speed and reliability is a high dependency. And with firewalls and other kinds of things, with power outages that may happen, or other interruptions, or just an inability to maybe upgrade the network, the infrastructure to what really is needed. So you've got a balancing act of budget and equipment availability, so that's an issue. You also have a lot of security hurdles. You've got if it's something that is based in the cloud or an application service provider, an ASP, which is kind of an in-between local versus cloud, which is really what we're starting with our library system. Then you have the interactions with the content that you might store on their site that will cost you, because usually those vendors will say, okay, we'll give you X amount of gigabytes for free, and then beyond that you have to pay. And anyone who's used any kind of storage knows that you can quickly fill up any storage, no matter how big it seems at first. So you've got that, and then if you decide, well, we'll store it locally, we'll save money that way, that's fine, but then you need authentication between you locally and the system that is managed remotely. And how do you deal with the firewall? And do you have a T1 line or a validated line that's trustworthy, direct between you? And if you're in a corporate environment, yes, you do, and you have the money to pay for it because you can justify it. In an academic or cultural institution, you may or may not have that capability. It depends. So your user authentication is also an issue, and the big phrase is single sign-on. So you're not having 15 different usernames and passwords or a single username and password that can easily be hacked because you only have one, and if someone gets it, then they can get into everything you own or get access to. But you have a single sign-on authentication, and what does that mean? So, you know, those are the kinds of things you want to think about as you look at those kinds of things. They're definitely solvable, but they're just things to think about. Okay, so why is the internet, the integrated library system a catalyst for change? Well, access here to an electronic library catalog is a first, and that's a big change already. What's great is we've been already going through so many changes with all the different big exhibit halls and staffing changes and whatnot, this is yet just another thing, and so it's great because people's mindset is almost an expectation that, well, of course you're going to have some kind of electronic access. And would I like to do super duper Star Trek-y or Battlestar Galactica or whatever science fiction, if you like it, kind of environment? Sure. But you have to start with the basics. And there was a pent-up need for access to the museum's library's holdings, access to our e-content that we do have, some of our subscriptions, both free and for fee, and being able to easily access that. Also, we have the sectional libraries, which their holdings, who has what, instead of checking it out to those and then not knowing where they are, having a way to locate the materials and have that designated electronically, that's important. And also break down the barrier of the silo department physical collections, at least through the electronic access capability. Also, the online catalog access demonstrates library services attitude shift, that we will bring the information to you and service to you, and you don't have to take the time out of your day to come to us. And we do have a very old SharePoint 2003 intranet, but we're in the process of looking at upgrading that soon, and or redesigning it. Our external website design is being done right now and focused on just letting the general public know that we do have a research library should they have some specialized needs. And I'm also looking at the department's I support research and collections, which I belong to, which is all the scientific and history and anthropology researchers. But we do have education, we have exhibits, we have marketing, we have administration, we have advancement, which is the fundraising arm. So they all need services too. And as in all libraries in any institutions, you do have a core focus, but you also have a broad responsibility as well. So by inviting a bunch of these kind of folks beyond just my department to some vendor demos for our integrated library system, I was able to bring an awareness of not only that library system, but other potential tools to those departments. So that was really good, and that's really paid off. In fact, what that resulted in was here, where we had the Education and Exhibits Department asking me, gee, you know how to manage information. Could you help us? We have some consulting reports, but that we only want a small number of people to access. Is there a way to manage it? Well, we have something, a library system called EOS International's digital.web, and they have a tool called Knowledge Builder, and we're using that to do that. We're also doing something similar, but not restricting it to a small number of people with an extensive map collection and natural history art collection. And we've been testing out the OCLC Content DM tool for that, which frankly is complex, and their user guides and learning tools are not easy to use, but it does have some potential, and especially for managing image systems or image catalogs. But we're also looking at how it compares and contrasts to the EOSI Knowledge Builder. So we'll see how that goes. And so what I told the folks here, and this is what we're doing a three-prong approach. One is physical library opening, which we did last week on 4/11. Get it? 4/11, 4/11. And still they thought it was on 4/10 and whatnot. So that was pretty funny to me. It's like, okay, what was so hard about knowing that? But you know, one or two people weren't quite listening, but that's okay. We also have an online library catalog activation in progress, and we're working on some technical glitches, and that should be available to the general staff shortly. And the external website I was editing today and should be relaunching any day. But the big thing, believe it or not, was, oh my goodness, we also have Wi-Fi. And this is the only place in the physical building here that there is Wi-Fi. So I knew that would be something I would expect to have, and they've all had big smiles about the fact that we have it in here. So in my building, this is one of those buildings that it's almost like a black hole when it comes to telephone signal, cell phone signal, but Wi-Fi is in here, so not too shabby, and that should bring in a lot of researchers. So just a quick next steps, and then I'll get to the questions. We're using, as I said, eosdigital.web as a launch platform for services to staff, which helps us also demonstrate support and show alignment with the museum goals and objectives, which in whatever institution is critical. Align your services with the goals and objectives, not only of your department, but of your institution. We're linking to digital resources with various tools, and advocate for library services inclusion into the broader strategy and future plans, which is really important. And here, visitor experience is critical. That's what the main focus is. In a corporate environment, it's often who's the customer who's buying our services or our products. Here, it's the visitors. They are our key focal point. And how does the library not be a background part of it, but a proactive part? A broadened partnership with colleagues in similar organizations. I'm working with a lot of natural history museums and science museums around the country and beyond, and also interlocking with schools such as San Jose State's Information Sciences program and several others. I have graduate students from about 12 different library programs around the country over the past year, for both formal interns and for volunteers. So if you're interested in volunteering, talk to me. And here's a sample of one or two of you who are on this call, and you can see if you can recognize who they are. And a bunch of others who have been volunteers. One or two are undergrads, some have been retired librarians, and some have gotten full-time jobs since they've volunteered here. I'd like to think I helped them get some experience, so volunteering is a good thing. And so look at all of them wonderfully smiling. So I'm hoping they still are, and I think they are. And so with that, I leave you to questions. I should mention here, I'm holding something very rare. It's a fossilized brain of a sperm whale, the first known actual fossilized brain ever. And it's on loan to us by the family who discovered it in their farm in California. And it's here for study, and there's going to be some scientific research papers written about it very shortly, published, and just thought I'd throw that out to you. All right, so let's see. Yes, Cynthia, I am holding a brain. It is. And it's in two parts, and they're geodes. They're quartz geodes. So apparently bacteria or something had something to do with why this was even possible. It's a unique phenomena, never before ever known anywhere in scientific circles. So we'll see how this all works out. So who has some questions? And thanks for your attention, by the way. Nice. I see let's see. Somebody's raised their hand, so let's see. Okay, you're going to have to help me on how I answer this question. Yeah, Frank, go ahead and type your question. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Hi, Richard. Thanks. Very interesting talk. I think I met you briefly at Internet Librarian last fall, so it's I just now recognized you when I saw that last slide, so it's nice to see you again. I was just curious if I visited the California Academy of Science here in San Francisco, where I live, and I got a really interesting tour within the past year. And they also had an archivist on staff. They had some collections of more archival types of materials, like field journals. I can't remember some of the other stuff. I was curious, does your museum have those sorts of collections? And if so, are those managed by an archivist or somebody else, or do they come under your responsibility?
Hi, Frank. Yeah, yeah, I think we did meet once, Internet Librarian. It's likely. So good to talk to you again. Yeah, we do. That's a good question. That's a great question. We do have a lot of different kinds of materials. We do have an archives part of the museum, which is really meant for the institutional records. But I do have in our collection some original scientific materials and holdings, as well as I mentioned earlier, some original artwork, and we do have some maps too, that some hand-drawn maps even, and so they're managed in a couple of different ways here. The library itself has some of these. We have an organization called the Seaver Center for Western History and Research that has a lot of two-dimensional objects, photographs, papers, and whatnot. And then we have the archives department run by Kathy McNasser, where they do have a lot of the administrative papers, but also some other materials like that. And over time, I'm looking at how we can incorporate access to those materials. The Seaver Center materials do get cataloged through the library as far as the published material, but the original materials are done separately, and they are working on those. So I hope that answered your question. Oh, and yes, Hart does have some special collections as well. Correct, Nancy. Thanks.
Hi, Richard. This is Cynthia. Great talk. Thanks for coming. I'm wondering, now that the library is open to researchers, you're still physically accessible by visitors and the general public who come into the museum. So are you getting visitors are you getting patrons just from the visitor population, and how do you handle them? Do you turn them away, or do you educate them, or what's going on with that?
Well, Cynthia, right now the way I'm handling that is because the library is in the corner of the building, most people are not realizing we're here, except when they visit the Galapagos turtle, or tortoise, I should say, that's right outside the door, and I keep the door closed. So there's supposed to be a sign that says by appointment only, and I'm in the process of getting that made. So one of the ways I'm handling the visitors is that because some people have wandered in here, and I let them know that this is a special library for research purposes, and it's usually kids and their mom and dad and that kind of thing, and so they're just more curious that we even have a library. So at the moment, it's not been many people, but I think as the external website is launched and people become more aware of that we have a library, we'll get more access requests. Later this year, we're also going to be working with the docent library, which is the portion of the volunteers who teach in the halls. So there might be some projects that way, and I'm working out a plan. I haven't figured it out yet, frankly, but it's going to have to be under strict controls and only during certain hours during the week where the public will be enabled to come in and access the collection, and only as what would be called a closed stack collection, meaning that anytime they want something, they're welcome to use either the computer to access the catalog, or the printed card catalog, but they will have to wait for me to retrieve the materials for them. So that's where we're at, and I am looking for volunteers. And I think you had a question about what kind of skills I know Nancy had that question, what kind of skills of volunteers I'm looking for. And I'm looking for a variety. We have a lot of basic shelving books, reorganizing books, as well as cataloging. I'd really be interested in people who are interested in cataloging to help just get this retrospective cataloging projects going. I'm also interested in our library system. We have a lot of data entry, and any of you who need experience with a library system, once you've had inside the office experience on a library system, which is really important experience to have. It doesn't matter what kind of library system you might end up using. either just strictly as a user or as one of the managers of one, that it's important to get some of that experience. So that would be some kinds of people. And I'm also looking for help writing research grants or grants to get money to help fund all the wonderful ideas I have to get done here.
Tom, did you raise your hand? Okay. I'll go ahead and get off the mic. I was going to ask another question, but I don't want to hog the mic, so I'll give it to you.
Okay, no problem. Without the microphone, typing a question is perfectly fine. Did it take a long time to find a system? Well, I'm kind of a technology person, so I been looking a long time, and once I knew I was going to be working here, I knew immediately I'd start to look around. So I went to SLA, ALA, exhibit halls, and I asked a lot of questions. And one of the key things about it took a few months, but the formal process only took about 2 to 3 months. And that was because I had a real good list of what I needed. And one of the key things you want to think about is what kind of clients does the service provider have? Meaning, do they have the kind of clients that match who you are? So I was looking at all the different possibilities, and there's lots of library systems out there, and whatever they're morphing into, you can call them information management system, content management systems, whatever you want. But I was looking at who knew what a special library was and who had a focus on cultural kind of institutions, even in a part of their constituency. Those that were focused mainly on large public libraries, off the list. Those with large academic library constituencies, off the list. Those that were focused on corporate libraries, off the list. So because I knew that I would be a small fish in a big pond, they could care less about all my needs, relatively speaking. Not that they don't care, but they would care less. And so that was a big issue. And so the key thing is to understand what your needs are. Understand financial requirements. How much money do you have? Understand, do you need remote access or just local access? Understand your technology capabilities of you and your staff, if you have any, of your IT staff in your organization, and things like that. Understand what kind of training is provided. Is it included? You know, those kinds of broad things. And know what kind of things you're going to need over the next 2 to 4 years. As far as cost, it depends. I hate to tell you that, but the answer, you know, Tony's asking how much. It can run in the thousands to the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in cost, certainly to a startup cost. And it could be even bigger if you're at a big institution. It just depends. And I would say a rule of thumb is, and I know we're over time, it's like 7:01 now, but I apologize if you have any other questions. I'll hang out for a few more minutes. But all I can say is the cost varies. And one of the things when you sign a contract is you're not allowed to disclose how much you pay. So, but that's the kind of thing where it's so important that they don't teach you in library school about how do you get to the negotiated fee and how do you understand how much it really costs. One of the key things I'll recommend is every year in the Library Journal there's a information technology article on the industry, but that is so general, and Marshall Breeding does a great job, who does it right now, and I've looked at that for many years in the different people that have used it, but it just tells you one aspect. It really doesn't tell you the cost, and all I can tell you is talk to me offline and I can give you a better idea, especially if I understand what kind of institution. So that would be my answer to that one. So I know we're over time, but if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Jennifer, go ahead, and I'll get off the microphone.
Hi, Richard. I'm Jennifer Greenwood. I'm a student at SJSU. Thanks so much for this informative talk. I loved how you just answered Tom's question. So I hope this doesn't sound like a job interview question, but I come from a technology background too, and I kind of understand the systems implementation angle that you were just talking about. And I'd like to hear a bit about your career progression and how you went from working at IBM doing systems with clients to where you are now, and maybe how you made those transitions.
Hi, Jennifer. Yeah, it's quite an eclectic background, which I'll give you I'll try it in under a minute. Basically, I was interested in museum work back when I was an undergrad. Actually, I was originally interested in being an astronomer, but that's a whole other story. But ended up working in science education and interning. Yes, I was an intern too and a volunteer at the American Museum of Natural History. And that was great. I thought, okay, this is the kind of work I want to do. And by the way, in the education department, not in the library. And in fact, the librarian there, she was quite an interesting character. She was quite a strong-willed person, but in those days you had to be. It was great though. And so anyways, I ended up getting my first master's at Utah State University, ended up working in an academic library for a couple of years, decided to go back to school and get my ALA accredited degree from the University of Denver, worked as an intern, a paid intern at IBM, was hired as a engineering and senior research librarian, was there for a couple of years, was transferred into the marketing division of IBM and sales division, and ended up working with librarians and cultural institutions in various jobs, including consulting and creating a consulting company within IBM when it was transitioning to a services company, and I spent 18 years in that organization. My last job there was as a software applications owner, marketing owner, for what's called IBM Content Manager, which includes a lot of aspects of image and words and all the other kind of management you can think of that today is no big deal, but in the 1990s was a really big deal. Ended up working for Infantry for a couple of years. That's how I got to California. And of course they moved to Connecticut after a couple of years, and that's where I was living before I moved out to California, funny thing. And then left there to go to work for Amgen, a biotech company, for a couple of years, where I got back into more what would be considered traditional library, managing their technology and copyright and all sorts of other systems. And then this job came up a couple of years later, and that's how I got here. It took me a couple of decades to get back into real museum work as an employee, but here I am. So that was kind of the whirlwind tour. So don't let your interests restrict your career. Don't think you have to be a librarian. Don't think you have to be you know, whatever people tell you you have to be. You can do anything with your library degree. I used my background in so many ways as a marketer, as a consultant, as, you know, it just makes us better at what we do because we know how to find the information long before anybody else, or how to do it more effectively on the internet better than many other people. So don't let anyone stop you on that. And there you go. So, you know, whatever you want. I give a lot of talks on the future of information, and I use Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I use a lot of other things like that. So I have a whole diatribe I can do on that. That'll be another talk for another time. How about that? Any other last minute questions before we go? Was my website reworked, and was that done in-house or by an external vendor? Okay, so the external website that you'll get to see when you go to nhm.org once it's made live, we have in our marketing department, that's managed through there, and it's Drupal based. and very interesting. And my library system doesn't easily integrate with it, but that's my plan, is to have some aspects of it integrated into that. And so it was basically done in-house by our folks and not by an external vendor, and actually through my own expertise and that of my great volunteers when we get to it. So that's how that's done. Okay, I'll turn it back over to our hosts, and they can close out this day.
Thank you, Richard. That was very interesting and very informative. We appreciate you coming to talk to us tonight. I'm so glad that we had the crowd that we did as well. So thank you all for coming too. And please join me in giving Richard a nice round of virtual applause. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah.
I too would like to echo Carletta and thank you, Richard, for your fantastic, informative presentation. Listening to you speak this evening has been a pleasure, and we are very grateful that you shared your knowledge with our 2 chapters tonight. For those attending who are interested in becoming involved with the SJSU ASIS student chapter or the LA chapter of ASIS, our 2 chapters web links are provided on the current slide. Again, thank you to everyone for attending this program tonight, and I hope you have a good evening. Good night.